If you had the chance to come back to life, even if it meant spending decades immersed in liquid nitrogen, would you take it?
I thought, wow, what if you had a 1 in a million chance to peek into the future? Wouldn't that be an incredible fantasy?
If you believe in cryonics, it's a chance you won't want to miss.
Science fiction is becoming science fact on a daily basis.
Can the science of cryonics really reawaken the dead?
In order to believe in cryonics, you would have to believe that you could recreate a cow from a hamburger. It makes great science fiction, but is not science.
This is a controversial experiment with a radical goal. A small group of people are attempting to defy the one certainty that faces all of us: death. Their ticket to a second life is cryonics. For the first time ever, cameras have been allowed in to film the process in its entirety. When they die, these pioneering patients are preserved in chemicals designed to theoretically protect cellular structure. They are then immersed in steel tubes filled with liquid nitrogen called dewars. Here they face an indefinite wait at negative 321 degrees Fahrenheit until science finds a way to bring them back to life. There are just 2 organizations that offer the full service: the Cryonics Institute in Clinton Township, Michigan, and Alcor, based in Scottsdale, Arizona. Between them, they have 147 people cryonically preserved and 1,000 members already signed up.
We do encourage our patients to come visit, our members to come visit before they sign up, have a tour of the facility. We show them the patient care bay, the operating room. We explain the procedures and answer any questions that they have.
Members have 2 options. Some choose to place their entire body in storage. Others take a more drastic step and just preserve their severed head.
They are placed in here, head up, where this is the top of the head. That would be the neck. These are clamped into the forehead. The main reason that someone would choose a neuro procedure is because they want to have a new body. Some of our members are old. They think, it's time to start fresh. New heart, new liver, new lungs, new skin. You don't want to bring someone 99 and a half years old back in a 99 and a half year old body.
At Alcor, a whole body preservation costs $150,000, or a head $80,000, usually paid for by a life insurance policy.
The initial portion of the procedure, the stabilization, the cryoprotection, all told costs the organization about $45,000 to carry out. The remainder of the money goes into the Patient Care Trust. This is a trust established to care exclusively for the patients. It protects them, it provides for the maintenance, ongoing expenses, and also provides funding for eventual reanimation.
Although Alcor employs several scientists, there is no legal requirement to be medically trained to operate a cryonics organization. Like Tanya Jones, some staff members are simply dedicated enthusiasts.
This is Alcor's patient care bay. This is where all of our patients are currently stored in stainless steel tanks called dewars. Each of these containers holds a minimum of 9 patients, 4 whole body patients, and 5 neuros. They have capacity to hold as many as 45 neuros if they were exclusively used in that way.
Arthur Rowe is a governor of the Society of Cryobiology and a professor of forensic medicine.
To give people a false sense of security and hope that they will be reanimated is something that I think borders on science fiction.
Cryonics is a practice that lies outside the boundaries of traditional scientific thinking.
I do think that they are being duped, they're being conned, they're sold a bill of goods that involves a rather substantial amount of money to keep these individuals in perpetuity. This is not so, and I think as such, they are like salesmen trying to sell snake oil to people and just make money out of it.
Michael and Anita Riskin made the radical decision to sign up over 20 years ago.
Would you rather be part of the control group or the experimental group? And I decided the experimental group is for me. And it did change my life, actually. I stopped worrying about the prospect of death, actually knowing that I had taken a proactive step.
Now, their decision to become cryonically preserved is more poignant than ever. Anita is terminally ill with cancer.
I'm dying. I have too many tumors to count in my brain. I have too many tumors to count in my lung. I have tumors in my lymph node, in my chest. I have tumors in my leg, and my liver, in my kidney, and so on and so forth. So I'm going. I don't know how much longer, but it's there.
But cryonics is an unproven theory. For it to work, scientists must overcome major obstacles.
I think it's very important for us to continue our experiment. We need to prove it one way or the other. It hasn't been done yet. We don't know for sure that this will work.
Current cryonics techniques rely on the success of a process called vitrification. This means replacing over 60% of the water in the body with potentially toxic preservation chemicals, including ethylene glycerol and dimethyl sulfoxide. When exposed to cryogenic temperatures below -184 Fahrenheit, they react by turning tissue into an ice-free solid. To bring a patient back to life, science would not only have to reverse this, but it would also have to cure whatever killed the patient in the first place.
Once death has occurred, many changes occur in the body. The brain very quickly deteriorates in a matter of minutes. And how would you actually reverse that? That's something that's really in an unforeseeable future.
Sure does.
But people like Anita Riskin are gambling on the success of Alcor's experiment.
It would be a completely different experience if we didn't have cryonics as an option at the end of this particular road.
I definitely think that cryonics gives, especially my husband and my daughter and my son and my grandchildren, something to hold on to, that Grammy's not exactly gone. She's just, I call it the freezer factory. I know I have an option besides getting burned and getting buried, which I can't stand. It sounds horrible to me.
Other people might possibly criticize Anita in the sense of she's running away from death, she doesn't want to face a kind of a normal process, and in fact I think both Anita and I are facing the prospect of death head on, fully acknowledging it, fully understanding that this is going to happen. So really, rather than running away from it, I think we're running towards it with all the vigor and intelligence and organization we can possibly muster.
People say to me, I have a certain life and I'm going to live it and be done with it, which like bogs my mind that people have that attitude. I want to live forever and ever. I love life. Just love it.
But to live forever, Anita will have to become a human guinea pig as her body is put through the controversial cryonics procedure. Arizona, in the heart of America's Wild West, a frontier land where pioneers once sought a new life in an untamed wilderness. Today, Arizona is now home to another wild frontier. This quiet backwater near Phoenix is the headquarters of a controversial scientific project. Alcor is one of the pioneers of cryonic preservation. They are selling the ultimate commodity, the chance of eternal life. When clients die, they come here to be preserved in chemicals and placed in tombs of liquid nitrogen in the hope of a future resurrection.
We do call them patients. We do consider them patients. the way we kind of view it is that they're only mostly dead. There's a possibility that some of these people will be unrecoverable. There's a possibility that all of them will be recoverable. And so this time where they spend in the dewars will be more an interruption of life, not a cessation of life.
One person who bought into the dream is entrepreneur Terry Katz. He signed up for a full body preservation in 2000.
Eventually, man is going to try to figure out a way to extend and prolong its life, and this is just an extension of that. If I were to tell you that you have a chance at looking at the future for about the price of a cable bill per month, it would probably change your perspective. Compare it to the lottery. People pay, $10, $20 a week for the cost of a lottery ticket, 147 million to 1 chance. I'm paying about the same for a life insurance policy that will pay off this Alcor when I'm dead, for an opportunity to do so much more than any lottery could ever give you, an opportunity to peek into the future. That's priceless as far as I'm concerned.
The foundations of society and religion are built on the certainty of death, and cryonics is a practice that strikes at the very core of this notion. If it works, it will trigger a fundamental change in how we define death, a definition that is continually shifting with medical breakthroughs.
50 years ago, someone whose heart stopped was dead by those standards. Today, you can use defibrillation devices. Hearts are routinely stopped in surgery. The definition of death is changing.
If you were to have the perception that dying and bringing somebody back to life is wrong, then you would eliminate all the, the electrical paddles when somebody has a heart attack and bringing them back to life. You would eliminate all mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or any type of CPR.
Aubrey de Grey is a research scientist based at the University of Cambridge in England. His goal is to expedite the development of a cure for human aging and beat death.
Really, if one takes a proper informed biological view of what death is, then cryopreservation is simply stopping people from dying. It's keeping people alive biologically. And so I think once one understands the biology better, one can easily see that there is no moral issue here any more than there is in keeping someone on life support.
Cryopreservation is the culmination of over 200 years of scientific research into the mechanics of death. As early as the 18th century, British surgeon John Hunter believed freezing offered a way to suspend life. He conducted many experiments to try and prove his theory, but without success. Today, relatively simple living structures such as red blood and stem cells, sperm and embryos are now routinely preserved using cryobiology technology. To do this, scientists have to minimize damage caused by ice formation at low temperature storage.
Cryobiology is not simply putting something in a freezer and walking away, such as frozen meat or frozen vegetables. Cryobiology is much more involved. First of all, there's been a great deal of study of the formation of ice crystals, which do damage to the cells, how we can prevent this damage and modify the formation of ice crystals. We do this by putting in a cryoprotective additive.
At 21st Century Medicine, Chief Scientific Officer Gregory Fahey and his team of researchers are taking this principle a step further. Their mission is to successfully extend the shelf life of donor organs, which currently only remain viable for transplant for a few hours. But by preserving an organ at cryogenic temperatures, they can press biological freeze frame. Cellular decomposition that takes 1 second at a normal body temperature of 98.6 Fahrenheit will take 24 million years at the temperature of liquid nitrogen, negative 321 Fahrenheit.
As you cool to cryogenic temperatures, you can experience the sort of temperature equivalent of Einstein's theory of time dilation. Time stretches out more and more and more, and you can make it go as long as you need to.
His team have achieved a world first. They have cryopreserved a rabbit kidney, reversed the procedure, and successfully reimplanted it without losing the ability to sustain the life of the recipient.
Much to our amazement, it actually did survive. So we actually have finally accomplished this goal that I've been pursuing since 1972 of being able to vitrify a kidney, warm it back up again, transplant it, and have the animal maintain clinical normalcy indefinitely afterwards.
Cutting-edge scientific researchers like those at 21st Century Medicine have successfully battled to preserve single organs from healthy living animals. But Alcor is attempting to achieve the same thing on something far more complicated: an entire, dead human body. For Anita Riskin, her speculative decision to sign up to cryonics is fast becoming a reality. She is close to succumbing to terminal cancer.
During the last 2 weeks, actually, her main concern was being comfortable, seeing her family, the grandchildren. Every time she saw our granddaughter, she would perk up and give her a great big smile. Mostly, what we talked about was kind of muted in terms of expressions of love, expressions of the future, and that we hoped we would see each other again in the future.
As Anita's condition worsens, Michael notifies Alcor. This allows them time to prepare for their launch of the initial stabilization procedure on her death, before taking her to Arizona to complete the process.
The sooner we can initiate our treatment, the better the cryoprotection and ultimately the preservation as a whole will be.
The team has adapted several vans into ambulances to help patients reach Alcor as quickly as possible.
We're currently inside Alcor's transport vehicle. This is a vehicle we take out to a patient's bedside when they're not here, and we can do the entire stabilization procedure inside this vehicle.
As soon as a patient dies, the aim is to stop decomposition caused by oxygen deprivation, a process called hypoxia ischemia. Crucially, brain cells are the first to die.
Once they're pronounced legally dead, we place the patient in here where there's a cooling blanket on the bottom. We cover them in ice. The most important thing that you can do to prevent damage in someone in this condition is to cool. For every 10 degrees Celsius drop in temperature, there's a 50% reduction in metabolic demand, which means it takes twice as long for the damage to occur. And so our purpose with this system is to actually get the temperature down to just above zero.
A mechanical chest compressor is used to temporarily restore circulation before injecting a cocktail of medications to stop the blood from clotting. The patient's blood is then washed out and replaced with a temporary protective fluid. Trained volunteer Alcor members run the stabilization units. Most have little or no medical background. Among them, a friend of Anita Riskin's, special effects designer Regina Pancake.
Been on about 7 or 8 of these suspensions over a 10-year period, I guess, at this point. I can get called at 3 in the morning and go racing out to whatever hospital they tell me to. Instant response, I'd be the first responder to the situation. I do get a sense of satisfaction in doing this kind of work because it's proactive. I'm doing something and fully understanding what I'm getting into, because that could be me next, for all I know. I'm not killing people. I'm trying to save them.
As Anita faces her final few hours, Regina joins the family at her bedside.
We'd known for a few weeks that something was up and that she was taking a turn for the worst, and that's the yellow alert status. I got the call and I just had to go. There was a lot of friends of the family there. There was family there, and we all knew what we were waiting for.
People say that the last thing that goes is your hearing. So we made sure that we were talking to her and telling her that we loved her and that we'd see her, leaving good thoughts in her memory. And she took her last breath, and she was pronounced legally dead. Of course, from our position, it's not clinically dead, but it's legally.
At 4:30 p.m. on the 2nd of February, Anita Riskin passed away.
Because we were a little bit concerned that she might not make it to Arizona, we did deploy a team with a full set of equipment to do a stabilization procedure. It was kind of a precautionary backup plan. In retrospect, it turned out to be a very wise thing to do because someone was there at the moment her heart stopped and was able to begin the stabilization protocol immediately.
You have to do the job now, panic later, break down later. You can delay that. If you're properly prepared like that, you've got things to do. You don't have time for, freaking out. It was later when it got to me.
After the relevant death certificates and transport permits are signed, her body is released.
When I began in cryonics, one of the points that I'd said to the guys at the lab was I did not want to work on anybody I knew because I just didn't think I could hold it together. I mean, I'd never worked on anybody I'd known up till Anita. And yes, that was hard for me.
Anita's body is driven 360 miles from Los Angeles to Scottsdale, Arizona. She is taken straight into Alcor's operating room. It will take another 7 hours to perform the next stage of the cryonics process, which includes a complex surgical procedure. For the first time ever, cameras have been allowed in to film the cryonics process in its entirety. A process that is as brutal as it is pioneering. The radical practice of cryonics may seem to be lifted straight from the pages of science fiction, but this isn't fantasy. This is fact. 21 hours after her death from cancer, Anita Riskin is in the early stages of being cryonically preserved in the hope of future reanimation. A team of 8 led by Tanya Jones will oversee the operation. 2 trained surgeons will be on hand to assist. The other 6 are Alcor staff members with no formal medical background. The process begins by opening the chest cavity. Plastic tubes called cannulation tubes are sewn into the heart to provide an entry and exit point for the cryopreservation fluid.
Okay, I'm putting a purse string in the right atrium.
These tubes connect to a heart bypass machine that will pump the cryopreservation fluid around the body. The fluid travels via the cardiovascular system, which normally supplies the body with blood. The journey begins inside the aortic arch of the heart. The chemical solution then travels through the arteries, to the capillaries, and into the cells. Any leftover cryopreservation fluid then exits the body via the veins and out through the right ventricle of the heart, taking with it water, dead blood cells, and salts called electrolytes. The entire cycle repeats until the optimum amount of water in the cells is exchanged for the chemical substitute.
Okay, the circuit is connected. All right, we're opening the arterial side. Opening the venous. Got return.
Okay, starting the ramp.
The field of cryonics is at the outer reaches of a science that has at its roots more conventional medical applications. In his work to cryopreserve organs, Gregory Fahey has overcome a series of complex challenges.
If you rip apart the glue that basically holds the cells together, even if the cells survive, they're not going to do what they normally do when you thaw out, and that's the basic problem of freezing an organ.
One major challenge is to prevent the catastrophic damage caused by ice crystal formation at low storage temperatures.
Let's say you're hiking the mountain and you discover a rock and you find that it's been split in half. It may be because the previous winter, water seeped into a crack in the rock, and when it got cold and the water froze, it can exert 20,000 pounds per square inch, which is enough to actually split open a rock. So if water wants to freeze and push aside something biological in your body, there's no possibility that your body could resist that force.
To overcome this, they replace as much water as possible in the kidney cells with a high concentration of chemicals that can preserve the cell structure below freezing temperature.
Living cells never expected to encounter such alien conditions. Life is predicated upon water. The very structure of cells, the membrane, is held together by the presence of water. All of the chemistry that happens in the cell requires water, and we're asking the cell, in fact, not just a cell, but an entire organ, to survive and do well after we replace more than 60% of the water in the cell.
The chemicals are designed to mimic the molecular action of water.
And what we've discovered is that it's possible to almost fool the cell into thinking that it's still as well hydrated as it normally would be.
But at Alcor, they are trying to trick the human body into reacting the same way. A tall order, considering 72% of the body's fat-free mass is made of water.
I believe the people who want to promote cryonics do play up the science behind it, but there's very little science behind it. As a scientist, you have to be practical and take things one step at a time. You never say never, but you also have to be realistic in what your goals are.
In the operating room at Alcor, the cryonics team have reached a critical stage in the preservation procedure. The concentration of cryoprotective fluid is gradually being increased. But if the exchange happens too quickly, cells will be torn apart by the high concentration of the chemicals.
Yeah, leave it open.
The brain needs close attention. This is the core of a patient's emotion, intelligence, awareness, and memory. And if reanimation is going to work, it must have the best cryoprotection and the least ice damage possible. To monitor the uptake in Anita's brain, they use surgical trepanation tools to drill through her skull.
At this point in time, we need to see the brain because it will tell us how well the tissues are taking up the cryoprotectant. This is important because if it's swelling, we adjust our protocol in one way. If it's shrinking, we continue with the existing protocol. The hope is that the brain will shrink fairly significantly as a lot of the water is pulled out of the tissue. This helps in the vitrification protocol to prevent the formation of ice crystals later.
The temperature of the brain has to be kept at just above freezing to prevent further decomposition.
We're going to insert temperature probes so we can monitor the temperature of the brain directly. And we're going to introduce a couple of probes that we call crack phones. These are basically acoustic probes that listen for fracturing events.
Fracturing is a highly damaging process that slices through the tiniest cells to entire organs and even bones. At the laboratories of 21st century medicine, Gregory Fahey and his team have made remarkable headway in overcoming the problem. Fractures usually occur below negative 184 Fahrenheit, at a point called the glass transition temperature. This is when the chemicals in the cryoprotectants turn into an ice-free solid similar to glass, a process called vitrification.
So this is what we mean by a glass in the context of cryobiology, a liquid that does not flow. If this had frozen, it would have turned bright white. If I tap the kidney, it has that sort of tinny sound of tapping on glass.
But if the temperature is dropped too quickly during cooling, some parts vitrify more quickly than others, increasing the risk of fracturing.
One side is contracting away from a subdomain on another side with such tremendous force that it actually exceeds the physical strength of the system, and the system fails, it cracks. You can see a fracture plane going along that direction, and that direction. The fractures in the tissue cut through all tissue elements indiscriminately, including blood vessels. Anything that happens to be in the way is cleaved by that fracturing process.
The researchers at 21st Century Medicine have overcome extraordinary hurdles to control fracturing events. But cryopreservation is far from a perfect technique, and Alcor is trying to prevent fracturing in something far larger, the human body. Each patient is expected to go through about 10 fracturing events, and for people that have paid $150,000 for the privilege, the stakes are high.
Okay, lift again.
26 hours after she died, cryonics patient Anita Riskin is about to be taken through the initial cool-down stage. After her blood was replaced with preservation chemicals, she is transferred to an insulated holding chamber, which is pumped full of liquid nitrogen vapor.
We will rapidly drop our temperature to just above the glass transition point for the cryoprotectant, which in this case is about minus 110 degrees Celsius. And then once that's done, we'll pull her out of the cool down box. We'll place her in a sleeping bag, put her in a pod, which is the permanent storage container, and then she will be very slowly cooled to liquid nitrogen temperatures.
Anita Riskin is Alcor's 73rd patient to be cryopreserved. After 43 hours in the cooling chamber, she is then transferred to an individual steel dewar for the next 15 days and taken down to below the glass transition temperature of negative 184 Fahrenheit. Anita's husband visited her a week into the initial cool down.
I went over to the tank, gave the tank a hug, and I kind of knew which side of the tank she was in. And I kind of whispered to her a little bit and told her that I loved her and that I would be seeing her.
In some ways, I think cryonics helps with the closure process. Gives you a little bit of hope that someday you may see this person again. In Michael's case, it really helped him deal with the fact that his wife was dying.
But this is where the detractors lay on heavy criticism.
You're trying to cheat Mother Nature. All of us come to this earth, we live a finite life, and eventually leave this earth in the form of death. And what bothers me is that many of these cryonics people give bereaving parents or spouses false hope of security, and I think this is taking advantage of somebody's state of bereavement. Cells are programmed for having a finite lifespan, as are people, and eventually every species will die, and it's a propagation of the species which keeps it alive.
While the practice of cryonics divides the scientific community, it can also divide families. Robin and Tilly Nides have been married for 3 years, but while Robin is a fully signed-up member of Alcor, his wife remains adamantly opposed.
It's just where you draw a line, isn't it? At some point, it's going to end. There is one planet. There's not enough room for everybody indefinitely on it. So, you know, all you're doing is delaying a parting. If someone is potentially not dead, then obviously you can't have closure because they're not closing that chapter on their life. I mean, I think, for me, I can think of nothing worse than having a frozen parent.
Tilly's husband Robin lost both his parents at a young age, and he has a very different perspective.
If my mother had been knowledgeable and had made the choice and had frozen herself, maybe it would have given me a little bit more comfort that I don't know when she's going to be there, that I know that, you know, she's there.
I can understand being afraid of death. I can understand wanting to put it off. But just because I understand that impulse doesn't mean I think that it's right. And I just think it's a fear that you have to face, and you have to help your children grow up to face it.
But at Alcor, they believe they are helping families deal with death in the best way possible by preparing them for future reanimation.
We have families that send Christmas cards, birthday cards that we tuck away on occasion and sent to our archival storage so that when they do come back, if they do come back, all of that will be available to them.
The archive storage facility is hidden at a secret location deep in the desert.
It allows us to preserve photos, journals, memorabilia, things that would be important to the individual, and perhaps assist with the memory, testing the memory and ensuring that the individual that was preserved is the one that is reawakened.
But revival scenarios for cryonics patients are extremely speculative. There is no scientific evidence that current patients will ever stand a chance of being brought back.
In the future, if I'm reanimated and get reintegrated in society, and for whatever reason that's not possible for Anita, it would make me very sad, actually. But we sometimes have to live with sadness.
After 15 days in a temporary cool-down doer, Anita Riskin is about to go through the final stage of the cryonic storage procedure.
At the moment, we're preparing to transfer the patient from the cool-down doer into the more permanent storage. And to do that, we actually have a spare space that has an empty pod. So we're going to remove the empty pod to make room for Anita.
After being gradually cooled to negative 321 Fahrenheit, she is now ready to be placed in her final doer.
Everybody ready?
This is a risky process. The container will be exposed to room temperature. The transfer needs to be as quick as possible to keep her core temperature stable. Her body is lowered into the final doer, which contains 3 other patients. Going in head first ensures that the brain is always protected, even if the liquid nitrogen level becomes dangerously low.
In an ideal world, we would both be revived simultaneously with our memories and identities completely and be intact. And if I had to picture a perfect scenario, we would be sitting in a comfortable chair with our arms around each other and saying hello again.
But with the science of cryonics in its infancy, there's little proof that current revival scenarios will ever work.
The philosophy of believing in cryonics, to me, is akin to the philosophy of believing that you can turn hamburger back into a full cow.
If scientists are to raise a cryonics patient from the dead, they will have to overcome extraordinary hurdles, among them unraveling the death process itself.
If death occurs and lasts for minutes and hours, then you have irreversible damage to the individual, primarily in the brain and perhaps in the heart and many other functional tissues.
The damage caused by toxic vitrification techniques will also need to be reversed.
We do know that we will have to devitrify the patients. We're going to have to repair whatever damage was caused by the application of the stabilization protocol, and we're going to have to cure whatever it was that killed the individual.
These are seemingly insurmountable obstacles. But there is one emerging area of science that cryonicists believe may offer hope. A future revolution in atom-size medicine.
Nanotechnology will definitely have a place in reanimation the way preservations are performed today. We know that things like fracturing and some of the cellular damage will need to be repaired on the cellular level.
Each of these futuristic tiny nanorobot machines are estimated to be only 250 nanometers in length, or 400 times smaller than the width of a human hair. Ralph Merkel is a key research figure in the world of nanotechnology. He's also on the Alcor board of directors and a member himself.
One of the approaches that will work quite nicely is to take the mechanical concepts that we know at our scale things that move and have mechanical interactions and scale them down. So you have gears and pulleys and levers and bearings. We are going to be introducing molecular machines, trillions and trillions of molecular machines, to repair the trillions and trillions of cells in the body. And this nanomedicine is going to revolutionize our ability to cure and heal. It's the fundamental reason that we think cryonics will actually work.
But the role of nanotechnology in the future of cryonics is hotly contested. Dr. James Baker is also looking at ways to develop medicine at a molecular level, but built from the body's own biological systems.
I think, unfortunately, there's been really an inability of people to present what's real and what is fiction. Many of the mechanical structures that people talk about, small robots, are impossible. They can't be made because they violate the laws of physics. And while it is a very attractive thought that they could fix cryonics and make us all immortal, the real likelihood is that anything they're talking about now would not be able to fix the major issues with freezing and fracturing of tissue and disrupting of cells. There's no data for that at all.
But for those that have chosen to have their heads preserved, cryonics will have to overcome the most extraordinary hurdle of all: how to grow an entire human body from scratch. Until some definitive answers are found for preserved members today, reanimation remains nothing more than a theoretical concept. Even if the body could be physically repaired, no one can predict the potential psychological damage.
Once they're revived, then we'll have to deal with the social, psychological sorts of issues. What are they going to do for a living? How will they understand what happened in the time that they were preserved? What happened to their family? Lots of questions and reintegration issues would have to be addressed.
Even if Tilly were to agree to be freeze-dried with me and we were to be thought out together, we might not have any memory of who we were, any knowledge of language, personality, character, and we might not fall in love and consider to be married again. And so that's a whole other issue beyond physical preservation, which I understand, but I don't think that is sufficient to do nothing.
And while Alcor may guarantee their patients will be looked after while in storage, there are no certainties that a future society will do the same if they are ever brought back.
I sincerely think that the science will pull it off. What I'm worried about, more or less, is the society. Will the society allow it?
How does the story of man unfold? Where will we be, 500 years from now? Will we be more violent, less violent? That's the whole reason for doing it. To see the world in a different light, to see how things have evolved. Are we driving around in cars, or is it sky cars? I wouldn't want to be an animal in a zoo or some kind of oddity. Presuming that the same laws are in place in terms of personal freedoms, I don't think that they could isolate me or keep me under lock and key.
You'll only be brought back if people want to bring you back, and it's not going to be easy to bring you back. So it's rather unlikely that people will bring you back in order to torture you, for example, or in order to make fun of you.
If the pioneering cryonics patients of today prove the skeptics wrong, they may even become the celebrities of the future.
First of all, I can do the talk show circuit. There'll be Jay Leno's great granddaughter will be doing the Tonight Show at that point. I would be a person that people would really want to know, what was the 20th century like and the 21st century like?
But critics maintain these are issues that will never be a problem, as cryonics simply will not work.
Do I think the money spent in cryonics is a waste? By and large, yes. Those people who are working on trying to preserve organs is an admirable thing. But cryonics has no redeeming value, because I think most people recognize that it is somewhat science fiction and not true science.
If someone wants to say it's wacko, that's their prerogative. I'm certainly not going to argue with them. I'm just going to keep working on it until we have a real answer.
Maybe by looking back, not forward, history offers a greater clue into the true feasibility of cryonics.
We've seen that flight to the moon made the transition from being science fiction to something that would actually occur.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, I think if you look at the history of science, you'll find that almost every major advance has met with its critics, who have said that it's impossible, unworkable, uneconomical, and then, of course, when it's demonstrated, they announce that it's obvious and they knew it all along.